October 31st, 1917. Eastern Palestine. 800 Australian horsemen wait in a valley 2 miles from the Ottoman town of Beersheba. They have been riding for 2 days with minimal water. Their horses are exhausted. Ahead lie trenches, machine guns, and barbed wire. In 4 hours, they will attempt something no military doctrine recommends. They will charge, mounted, at full gallop, directly into prepared defensive positions. They should be annihilated. Instead, they will break through. They will capture the town, and they will change the course of the Middle Eastern theater of the First World War. This is the story of how that happened and what it cost. By 1917, the Great War had become a stalemate of unimaginable scale. On the Western Front, millions of men faced each other across miles of trenches. Progress was measured in yards, purchased with tens of thousands of lives. But there was another war. In the deserts of the Middle East, British and Commonwealth forces were pushing north against the Ottoman Empire. Here, the fighting looked different. Space still mattered. Movement was still possible. And cavalry, already obsolete in Europe, might still have a purpose. The obstacle was a defensive line running from Gaza on the Mediterranean coast to Beersheba, 40 miles inland. The Ottomans had fortified both positions. Gaza had been attacked twice by British forces. Both assaults failed bloodily. In June 1917, General Edmund Allenby arrived to take command. His orders from London were clear. Take Jerusalem before Christmas. Give the Empire a victory it could celebrate. Allenby understood that a third assault on Gaza would fail the same way the first two had. He needed a different approach. He would use deception, convince the Ottomans that Gaza remained the target, then strike the inland flank at Beersheba with overwhelming force. But Beersheba presented a unique problem. The town sat at the edge of the Negev desert, sustained by underground wells that had provided water since biblical times. Any army approaching from the south would have to cross waterless country. Every man needed a gallon of water per day. Every horse needed 4. If the attack on Beersheba succeeded but the wells were destroyed, the offensive would collapse. Men and horses would die of thirst retreating across empty desert. Ottoman engineers knew this. They had prepared demolition charges on every well in the town. The plan required speed and surprise. Reach Beersheba before the garrison could react. Capture the wells intact. Everything depended on timing. For the assault on Beersheba, Allenby would use mounted troops. The Australian Light Horse Brigades had been fighting in the Middle East since Gallipoli. They were trained as mounted infantry, riding to battle, then dismounting to fight on foot with rifles. They were not traditional cavalry. They carried rifles, not lances. Their bayonets were 9 inches long, barely adequate as improvised swords. They had never trained to charge enemy positions while mounted. On the night of October the 30th, British and Anzac infantry moved into position south of Beersheba. The 4th and 12th Australian Light Horse Regiments circled wide to the east, riding through darkness to approach from the blind side. They rode without lights, maintaining radio silence. The horses had last drunk the previous evening. By dawn on October 31st, they were already thirsty. So were the men. At dawn, British artillery opened fire on Beersheba's southern defenses. Infantry began their assault. The plan was methodical. Take the high ground south of town by midday, enter Beersheba from multiple directions, secure the wells before they could be destroyed. But the defenses proved stronger than anticipated. Ottoman machine guns commanded every approach. By noon, the infantry advance had stalled short of the town. The temperature climbed past 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Horses that had not drunk since the previous evening stood in the sun, heads low. Troopers rationed water in small sips, knowing the consequences of running dry in this country. At 3 in the afternoon, Allenby's headquarters sent word to the Light Horse Brigades waiting east of the town. The infantry could not break through in time. Ottoman engineers were preparing to destroy the wells. If Beersheba did not fall before dark, the offensive would fail. Brigadier General William Grant commanded the 4th Light Horse Brigade. He studied the ground between his position and Beersheba. 2 miles of open country, sloping gently upward toward the town's eastern defenses. Ottoman trenches and wire waited at the far end. Military doctrine was clear. Mounted troops did not charge prepared defensive positions. The machine gun had made such attacks suicidal. At Gallipoli, at the Somme, at Verdun, cavalry charges against entrenched infantry had been massacres. But Grant had no time to dismount his men and advance on foot. Darkness would fall in 4 hours. The approach on foot would take at least 3, leaving no time to secure the wells before the demolitions. His men were mounted infantry, not shock cavalry. Their horses were exhausted and desperately thirsty. Their bayonets were inadequate as cutting weapons. They had trained their entire service to fight dismounted. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Grant gave the order. The 4th and 12th Light Horse Regiments would charge Beersheba, mounted, at the gallop, directly into the defenses. The distance was just under 2 miles. At a gallop, perhaps 4 minutes. 800 men on 800 horses spread across a mile of front. They emerged from the valley in 2 lines, the 4th Regiment in front, the 12th following. They began at a trot, then broke into a gallop as they cleared the rise and Beersheba became visible ahead. Ottoman gunners opened fire at 1,500 yards. Machine guns from the forward trenches, rifles from the main positions, artillery from batteries behind the town. The Ottoman defenders had trained to stop infantry attacks. They aimed low, targeting the mass of approaching horses and riders. But horses at full gallop cover 30 miles per hour. By the time bullets reached the space where a target had been, it was gone. At 400 yards, some riders drew their short bayonets and held them like swords. Others gripped their rifles, prepared to use them as clubs. There was no formation anymore, only speed and forward momentum. The first line reached the Ottoman defenses at full gallop. Some horses jumped the trenches. Others crashed through gaps in the wire that infantry had cut during the morning assault. The riders swept past defensive positions so quickly that machine gunners could not traverse their weapons fast enough to track them. Within minutes, the 4th Light Horse was in Beersheba. Troopers dismounted and moved through streets, clearing buildings. Ottoman resistance collapsed. Soldiers surrendered or fled north. Engineers attempting to reach the wells were cut off and captured. By 6 in the evening, Beersheba had fallen. The wells were intact. Water flowed. Horses drank until they could hold no more. Men filled canteens and poured water over their heads in exhaustion and disbelief. 31 light horse troopers were killed in the charge. 36 were wounded. More than 70 horses died. Against prepared defenses, charging across open ground into machine gun fire, these casualties seemed impossibly light. By the standards of the Western Front, where thousands died for a few hundred yards of ground, Beersheba was barely a skirmish. Over 700 Ottoman soldiers were captured. The defensive line anchored on Beersheba had been broken. The road north lay open. 6 weeks later, General Allenby entered Jerusalem. The Ottoman Fourth Army retreated into Syria. Within a year, Damascus fell. The Ottoman Empire signed an armistice in October 1918. News of the charge reached Australia within days. Newspapers called it the last great cavalry charge in history. Artists painted it. Poets celebrated it. The story became legend almost immediately. But the legend diverged from the reality. The paintings showed noble warriors with raised sabers charging toward glory. The men who rode at Beersheba carried rifles and short bayonets. Most never drew them. They charged because there was no alternative, not because they sought heroism. They succeeded through a combination of courage, speed, and circumstances that could not have been predicted. The Ottoman defenders aimed too low. The horses stayed strong enough despite exhaustion and thirst. The demolition teams failed to reach the wells in time. If any one factor had been different, the charge would have ended in slaughter. That it succeeded does not mean it was wise. It means it was singular. Beersheba today is a city of over 200,000. The wells still flow, though they are now surrounded by highways and modern buildings. A monument stands near the site of the charge, showing a horse and rider frozen in motion. The charge at Beersheba was not the end of cavalry warfare. Mounted troops continued to serve in various armies for another 2 decades, but it was the end of a certain idea of cavalry. The massed charge, the decisive breakthrough, the romantic notion of warriors on horseback deciding modern battles. Within 3 years, tanks dominated battlefields. Within 20, cavalry had vanished from modern armies. The charge became history the moment it succeeded. The Ottoman territories the light horse helped capture were divided between Britain and France. Borders were drawn through ancient lands without regard for the people living there. Promises made to Arab leaders during the war were quietly abandoned. The consequences of those decisions continue to unfold. Beersheba itself changed hands again in 1948, during Israel's War of Independence. The town's Arab population fled or was expelled. New residents arrived. The wells that Australian horsemen saved from destruction in 1917 now serve a different nation. The last veteran of the charge died in the 1980s. With him went the living memory of that afternoon. What remains are photographs, documents, monuments, and stories passed down through generations of Australians, for whom Beersheba represents something about national character. But perhaps the truest memorial is simpler. 800 men on exhausted horses rode toward something that should have killed them. They survived through speed, timing, and improbable luck. They captured a town and secured water in a desert war where water meant everything. The ground remembers nothing. The distance from the valley to the trenches remains exactly 2 miles, the same distance covered in 4 minutes on an October afternoon when everything depended on speed, and speed depended on men willing to ride toward what they could not survive. Except they did survive, most of them. That remains the mystery Beersheba poses to history, not why they charged, but how they lived.